Have you ever come across older games that seem surprisingly futuristic, almost like they were made with tomorrow in mind? These standout titles didn't just shape their genres, they raised the bar for what games could aspire to be. Hi folks, it's Mac, and today in this video, 10 games that feel like they're from the future. We'll start by exploring Shenmue's QuickTime events and its weather system. Creating video games is often a gamble. You can never be certain how a new, innovative game mechanic will be received. Nowadays, it's common to poke fun at QuickTime events. They're overused. But back in 1999, when Shenmue introduced many of us to QTEs, they were mind-blowing. These QTEs were executed so effectively that they largely persuaded people to try the Sega Dreamcast. Yes, the entire console benefited. However, it wasn't just Shenmue's QuickTime events. The game's use of real-time weather and its detailed simulation of Japanese cities and towns through an advanced system felt incredibly futuristic. It marked a significant shift from the video games we were accustomed to back then. While it may not have been the most entertaining game of 1999, it was undoubtedly the most remarkable. Even today, few games replicate Shenmue's real-world, real-time weather system, but many have adopted elements of its design. Open-world games don't always incorporate Shenmue's mission structure, though some do. QuickTime events are now widespread, but they're rarely implemented as well. I'm not sure if any game has specifically tried to recreate Japanese cities in real time like Shenmue did. Still, various aspects of this game have influenced many others. Next up are the undeniably impressive graphics of Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay. To be honest, this game isn't flawless. Its gameplay didn't revolutionize the industry. The action sometimes felt a bit insubstantial, yet it was surprisingly solid for a game tied to a movie. Most notably, Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, despite being based on a concept often dreaded by movie fans, video game tie-ins, turned out to be genuinely good. It boasted state-of-the-art visuals and gameplay. I vividly recall my first encounter with it at a friend's place. He started the game, and I was blown away. It was the first time I'd seen bump mapping in action. I didn't even know what bump mapping was back then, and I thought, wow, that looks like sculpted plastic. That might not sound ideal, and it's probably not the exact effect you'd aim for in a game, but it was leagues ahead of anything I'd seen before. Interestingly, while the first Chronicles of Riddick film flopped at the box office, the game, released the same year, became one of 2004's top-selling titles. It used cutting-edge graphics and gameplay to weave a captivating story, and I'm serious about that. It laid the groundwork for many elements you'd see in games throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. Thanks to its pioneering bump mapping and visuals, this early example of cinematic gaming demonstrated just how immersive such games could be. While it wasn't the first story-driven game ever, it dealt a significant blow to traditional game design aesthetics and made a compelling argument for the cinematic games that gained traction later. The Silent Hill series holds the 8th spot. Before the PlayStation 1 era, video games didn't focus much on delivering genuine scares. The survival horror genre was non-existent. Even in the late 1990s, it was still developing. Resident Evil was the first to officially use the term survival horror, and we often refer to the original PlayStation game as the pioneer of its genre, but it's not like people turned to gangster films for jump scares. Resident Evil's frights were akin to those in 1950s horror films. Think visible strings, clunky animatronics, entertaining but not truly terrifying. Its blood was just pixels and its zombies were blocky polygons, nothing particularly impressive. In contrast, Silent Hill aimed to instill deep existential fear, embodying true psychological horror. Its graphics surpassed those of any prior horror game, using high-quality fog to mask hardware limitations. This fog in turn amplified the terror. Instead of a limited view of the screen, you saw a detailed scene shrouded in eerie fog. It was clever, masterful, and most importantly, terrifying. Silent Hill remains one of the most frightening games you'll ever experience. Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3 are arguably even more chilling, and it's remarkable that they emerged so early in gaming history. While it took decades to mature enough to tell such stories, these narratives arrives on the original PlayStation console. The The 7th entry is Jurassic Park Trespasser's Physics, a game where flawed physics now seems endearing, though modern players demand at least some realism. Trespasser ambitiously pursued realistic physics well before it was feasible, achieving it before Half-Life, albeit far less effectively. Remarkably, it managed this in a 1998 release, which also featured imposter rendering, allowing players with powerful processors to view a detailed forest biome at distances surpassing some contemporary games. Trespasser's physics and innovations were groundbreaking, and had the gameplay and hardware of the era been adequate, it could have achieved a different legendary status. Unfortunately, it overestimated the technological future, resulting in awkward mechanics like a clunky arm for wielding weapons. Had it launched just 5 years later, Trespasser might have been a massive success. Its excessive ambition, constrained by 1998's limitations, reveals more about its partial shortcomings than its overall failure, highlighting the need to aim high to achieve greatness, which Trespassers boldly did. Coming up next is Super Mario 64, a game that went all out decades ago to define what 3D gaming could be. Let's be real, during the awkward shift from 2D to 3D, video games were often kind of a disaster. Sure, some 2D games still nailed it, but early 3D titles were usually stumbling through growing pains with those fresh-out-the-box polygons. A lot of those games just didn't feel right. Sometimes even flat-out sucked to play. If you didn't live through it, it might shock you that Crash Bandicoot was seen as groundbreaking just for figuring out how to make partial 3D jumping halfway functional. The real struggle, though, was full 3D platforming. Most games on the PS1 had to awkwardly use a D-pad to navigate 3D space, and the Sega Saturn didn't fare much better. But then came the Nintendo 64, its funky 3-pronged controller, and Super Mario 64, which completely nailed 3D movement and platforming like no one else had managed. That's why it's earned a spot on our list of the top 10 games of all time. For years, it stood as the gold standard in 3D platformers, and honestly, it still might be. The game just did everything right. Movement, jumping, exploration, storytelling, power-ups, and all those tiny, perfect design details that make a game feel absolutely magical. Next up, let's talk about Dune II and its role in shaping real-time strategy. RTS games are so common now that we barely think about their origin. Sure, we've all played Red Alert, StarCraft, and Command & Conquer, but before 1992, none of those icons even existed. Their foundations all trace back to the trail Dune II blazed. Yes, Dune II, a surprisingly excellent tie-in based on a cult sci-fi movie, which itself was adapted from an even more niche book series, somehow became the unlikely cornerstone of an entire genre. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, like something you'd piece together in a game of Mad Libs. Maybe it's wild to imagine the original Dune film sparking something as defining as StarCraft, but that's exactly how it went down. While Dune 2 might not top the list of greatest RTS games, it was an RTS game before that term even meant anything. And sure, we might have eventually seen the genre take off anyway, but credit where it's due, this was the genre's launching point, and without it, who knows if we'd have seen Command & Conquer and StarCraft arrive right on schedule in 95 and 96. Well. We should give credit to where it's due, right? Next up, fittingly, when we're talking about pioneers, is Metal Gear Solid. Sure, through today's lens, some of its mechanics and visuals might feel a bit clunky, but without it, we wouldn't have the massive library of action-adventure games that have shaped the past quarter century. Prior to its release, the idea of a game being both a cinematic blockbuster experience and deeply narrative-driven was virtually unheard of. Games were either arcade-style fun like Donkey Kong, or creepy survival horror like Resident Evil. Both iconic, but not exactly gateways to the sprawling, nuanced gaming worlds we now expect. Metal Gear Solid was the first game that truly felt like it merged Hollywood-level storytelling with gameplay, kicking off what we now recognize as the big league action-adventure format. And okay, modern players might smirk at the chunky graphics or its relatively brief runtime, especially when compared to today's epics loaded with hours of cutscenes and service model padding. But back in 1998, Solid Snake was unstoppable, ushering in a new era with a sneaky gravel-voiced bang. No, it didn't win a Game of the Year award because the Game Awards weren't even a thing yet. But if they had been, it would have stirred debate, because unlike a lot of modern fare, this game actually had you playing, and that, at its core, is what gaming's all about. Next up is Tenchu, a stealth action title that dropped in 1998. The same year Metal Gear Solid took over the spotlight as the definitive blockbuster of the genre. Everyone tends to think stealth action as a genre began with Metal Gear Solid, but the truth is, Tenchu was already out there doing similar things, arguably even pulling them off better. Okay, maybe not everything was better, but Tenchu offered a level of gameplay freedom with features like jumping, rolling, grappling hooks, and a full arsenal of ninja tools that let you approach missions your own way. Plus, it gave players control over the camera, a luxury Metal Gear Solid didn't offer with its fixed angles. Honestly, both games were ahead of their time in different ways, but Metal Gear Solid had the marketing muscle, so Tenchu got pushed to the side. It became the kind of gem players stumbled onto after finishing Metal Gear, and sure, it didn't have the cinematic flair or lengthy cutscenes, but that might have been its strength. From a pure gameplay standpoint, Tenchu did nearly everything Metal Gear Solid did, and then added its own flair on top. Don't get me wrong, I love Metal Gear Solid, it lives rent-free in my brain, but Tenchu really deserves more credit for what it brought to the table. Next up is Titanfall 2. And while it might seem like an odd pick for a list mostly focused on retro titles, let's be honest, this 2016 release still outclasses most modern games by a mile. It's tough to say exactly what Titanfall 2 did differently. It didn't pioneer any single genre, but instead fused multiple mechanics into a seamless, genre-defined experience that should have reshaped our collective understanding of what games can be. You'd assume after thousands of years of design iteration, we'd hit a creative ceiling. But let's face it, groundbreaking mechanics don't just appear out of nowhere. And yet, Titanfall 2 gave us that level. The time travel one. You know, the one that blows your mind every time and makes you yell, "Whoa!" with its shifting environments and endlessly replayable action. That masterpiece of level design is proof of what developers can accomplish when they truly push boundaries. And honestly, it alone sets a bar that most games never touch. Unfortunately, the reason we don't see more like it has a lot to do with how capitalism influences game development. Though I'm not here to bash it entirely, it's just that a 5-minute level that redefines an entire genre takes years to build and costs a fortune. And that's not always efficient in a market-driven world. And finally, last but surely not least, since we're talking about revolutionary titles that redefined what a video game could be, let's talk about Grand Theft Auto 3. Honestly, what more needs to be said? When it launched, it didn't just raise the bar, it reshaped the entire gaming landscape. Prior to GTA 3, genres were siloed. Driving was for racers, shooting was for FPS games, and exploration was the realm of platformers. But this game combined all of that into one sprawling, immersive world, something only Shenmue had flirted with before. But GTA 3 pushed the idea to its full chaotic potential. On a side note, it's kind of baffling that GTA 3 is called 3 when it's technically the 4th game in the series. There was a major expansion to the first game that could have counted as its own title. But hey, numbering quirks aside, GTA 3 shattered expectations by letting players do everything from high-speed chases to grabbing a burger mid-crime spree all in one seamless experience. It revolutionized the way main missions, side quests, and sandbox gameplay were designed, and its influence is still felt in countless games that followed. I've got a little bonus to share, and let's just say, without giving too much away, the central theme here is how truth becomes a slippery concept when we're overwhelmed with information. At first, you might think I'm talking about Metal Gear Solid 2, and that would make sense, but as the plot unfolds, it deliberately pulls the rug out from under you. Your objectives, your reasons for being there, and even your identity all get twisted by a system designed to mislead you. By the time the story reaches its climax, the ground has completely shifted, and you're left questioning everything you thought you understood. No matter what choices you make, it becomes clear that you're being manipulated by forces beyond your control. And that pretty much sums up the finale of Metal Gear Solid 2, and it really feels like the game was trying to warn us about the chaotic, disorienting post-truth era we now find ourselves in. But hey, that's just one example. Tons of games have offered glimpses of the future, so toss your favorites down in the comments. I'd love to dive into those conversations with you. And if you liked what you saw, it'd mean a lot if you could hit that like button, subscribe, and as always, thanks a ton for watching.